he starts stumbling towards the pit about, I don't know, 20 minutes after that. And he looked a little pale, but I didn't think anything of it. He grasps my hand, brings me in for a hug. I look at his hand. His hand's got blood on it. He gives me a big hug and whispers in my ear, "Yo, I got hit up." The guy who was put out for that hit, he wasn't meant to hit him. They were meant to hit this rapist, and the rapo wasn't there. And unfortunately, the rapo looked similar. I mean, you can get hit up because you look similar to somebody else, or they mistake you for somebody else, and that's exactly what happened. Greetings and salutations. I'm Victor Sordi, and welcome to my channel at 28 to Persevere. Thanks for watching. At the end of this video, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video among the many others that I have made available on my channel. As always, thanks to everyone. I give you all a shout out for supporting me and what we have done thus far. We're going to keep this going. We're going to keep this rolling along. My stories and my way of life and the things that I've experienced, it's an honor and a privilege to share them all with you. And I hope that the things that I have said and the things that I have shared can enlighten and inspire and make people just think about their own lives and where they stand and sit, and appreciate the position that they're in. No matter how rough the struggle is, and life is struggle, I get it. Everything we do in this life is struggle, and it's predicated on our success or failure, how we respond to that struggle. And I truly believe that. And the will to persevere is real, and it is something inherent inside of us, all of us. So if these videos can inspire you in some form or fashion, make you think, make you look at life a little differently, and view the prison system in such a fashion, because it's such a horrific environment, and my experiences are horrific overall. I mean, there's these channels and the stories that I tell, I don't speak upon them with any sense of the desire to glorify them in any form or fashion. And I hope that my pitch doesn't project that type of imagery, because that's not my preference, and it's not my prerogative to do that in any form or fashion. I mean, this is therapeutic for me, and I've spoke on that before, and it's also something that I want to do, to reach out to all of you and to help others that are perhaps going through what I perhaps uh, can share with you my experiences, and then maybe show you a new way of thinking, and maybe help guide you through your own pain and suffering and the struggles of life that you're dealing with. It doesn't have to be someone that can relate to me emphatically or empathetically because they did time or whatnot. And it could be anyone in any walk of life. I mean, we all struggle. We all struggle through the things we struggle through, and we got to find the means to an end, and our ability to overcome the odds and the adversity set upon us, man-made or otherwise. Whatever inspiration we have to tap into to make sure that we can find the means to that end. Perhaps my videos can help in that fashion. And I just want to thank you all for giving me this opportunity to speak on this and speak on my life experiences in the way that I do. Today, I want to talk about a recent exchange that I had with a brother of mine who I did many, many years with in the Auburn Correctional Facility in the 90s and all the way into the early 2000s. Just recently, he reached out to me, and he reached out to me unexpectedly and just called out of the blue. And we spoke for about an hour or two, and it was great to hear his voice. I haven't seen this man in got to be for almost 10 years now, but we share a special bond and a trust and a loyalty, and because of not only the blood, sweat, and tears of being in the prison system together and going through the ins and outs of everyday life, but we literally experienced a life and death exchange with an experience that he had, and then I also had uh, with what he went through. He's been home now for, I'd say, about 15 years, and he's going through some health issues and dealing with what he's dealing with on a personal level every day of his life. But he took the time, and he devoted the energy to call me and to reach out to me and touch base and just brainstorm a little bit with me. And it was great to hear his voice. I mean, it brought me back to a horrific time in our lives, but it also brought me back to the bond of brotherhood that is so dear to me, because I understand how that trust is forged, and through the suffering and the struggle and the hardships, and as I said previously, the blood, sweat, and tears of everyday life incarcerated, especially during the times of my incarceration in the Auburn Correctional Facility in particular. This guy and I, the bond that we shared, he brought back and we discussed it a lot, and and he thanked me on a personal level, and he didn't have to do that. Obviously, that was something that I didn't, in my mind, I wasn't in any form or fashion expecting because early on when we met and we basically were young kids at that time. I think we both were in our early 20s. He's a little older than me, so he was probably in his mid 20s. But he used to hit the pit a lot with me. He was on the weight court and he would work out, and sometimes he'd work with me as a workout partner. And he was a good guy, big tough Irishman. And one day while we were out in the yard, and I was in the iron pile, and I was hitting the iron with group of the other brothers, and he wasn't there. He said he'd be late. He had commissary, so he was going to show up late in the yard. And this time it was an evening rec at the time. And in the Auburn Correctional Facility, the weight pits are sectioned off. You have to go through a gate. Literally, it's a process to get through there. And then once you get to the gate, you can go into a separate part of the yard. The yard is pretty vast. But I didn't see him. But I heard all this commotion and some sirens came off, I heard the walkie talkies from the police that were walking the yard. I could hear them banging, and they were calling out different things. And while I was working out, I wasn't thinking anything of it. I was just working out. But we were wondering where he was at. Just because I like to, we all like to keep account of each other, looking out for one another. You always kind of look out for the next man when you're out there. You look for him in the yard. If whoever it is, you look out for certain brothers, and hey, we're so and so, and all kind of rally together. You meet up, and you go where you go as a group. Not only for protection purposes, but just for sanity. I mean, it's good to shoot the shit with people that you can relate to. That's a formality in prison and a survival mechanism. But I didn't hear from him. I didn't see him, and so I asked around if anybody's seen him because he went to commissary. So I was wondering what was up with him and whatnot. But lo and behold, he starts stumbling towards the pit about, I don't know, 20 minutes after that. And he looked a little pale, but I didn't think anything of it. He came out of the pit. He had his commissary, but he was kind of hunched over, like hunched over a little bit, like holding his abdomen area. And he put his commissary down because he had his net bag, and you have this big net bags where you put your food from what you bought in the commissary, and you can walk around the yard with it, whatever, until they call it early go in or whatever or whatnot, and you can hit it, go inside, drop off your stuff. But he went to the pit because I figured he wanted to get some workout in. So I said, "What's up?" to him. Went up to greet him formally, and he grasped my hand. And when he grasped my hand, brings me in for a hug. I look at his hand. His hand's got blood on it. He gives me a big hug and whispers in my ear, "Yo, I got hit up." So I was like, "Yo, what?" So he leans in and leans in again and says to me, "Oh, I got hit up, man. I got hit." So I look down at him, and he's got a lot of blood. Pulling in his gut area. Obviously underneath his shirt, he had a white shirt on and he had a coat on. So it was cool that evening. I remember that. I remember being real cool and seeing everybody's breath. And he was breathing really laboriously. And so I was like, "Yo, man, we got to take a look at that. What's up?" So he told me what happened with him, and some savage tried to rob him, tried to jack him for shit. And mind you, this is a big dude. This is a big Irishman. This guy's not no little fugazi man. I mean, he's a pretty tough dude, and he was well respected. But whatever it was, allegedly it was a gang hit or initiation, which happens in the joint. They pick somebody. It could be somebody they consider a herb, which somebody just to hit up or whatnot, or some people they just want to try their luck, and perhaps it was a young guy that wanted to blood in, so to speak, to get into the gang that they were in. And so this guy came up to him and tried to rob him of shit, and this dude was having it. My boy was like, "Yo, you ain't taking my shit," or whatever they said. Started going at it, and he also carried a shank with him, so he was strapped also. And in the course of the fight, the kid pulled out on him quick and hit him in the gut a couple times with what he had. And come to find out later, it was an ice pick that he got, however he got it. There's very means to an end to that, and that's a whole nother discussion. But he hit him up pretty bad, and I remember that. I remember it vividly. So I quietly leaned into him and told him I was going to, give the other brothers on the court, the weight court, heads up what was going on because I was going to get him out of there and try to look at what the damage that was done and pick his brain a little bit because I want to know exactly what went down. And we all had to be on point now because it can quickly escalate, especially if somebody gets hit up. I mean, then it becomes an issue quick. with everybody else that's affiliated with this person. And you don't have to be in a gang, but you look out for one another. And if somebody hits up somebody you're cool with, and especially you're in the vicinity, I mean, it's as if they hit you up. I mean, you're just as much involved now as the next man, and that's just the law of the land. And especially, if I was with this guy hanging tough with him, I'm not gonna let anything happen to him without me defending him, as because I know they also defend me as all the brothers did, with words and actions if they had to. It was a bond of trust and loyalty, and that friendship was a lot deeper than the common bonds of friendship that are formal and the formality outside the wall to a large extent. But um, I leaned into the other guys around the court and I let them know what was going on. I let them know that what was happening. And he took a seat on the weight court and tried to, feint that he was working out, pretending he was lifting weights and whatever, because he didn't want the police to get hip to, what just happened. So after we kind of rallied the troops, so to speak, I spoke to a lot of the guys, and so they kind of put up a shield wall basically to let me slowly grab him by his shoulders and just mosey on out of the weight pit, without anybody taking notice to what we were doing. And, he was leaking pretty bad at this point. He was pretty pale. And, you know, come to find out, this guy that he hit up, he also hit, he that hit him up, he also hit him, this other guy up pretty bad. And this guy was leaking also over the place. And lo and behold, he was trying to shield. I guess he went around his boys or whatever, and they tried to do something similar to what we were doing. And they were. I imagine the guy was scared to death, so he basically walked over to the police shack and acknowledged and let the cops know what was going on. That he was leaking up, and I don't know the full extent of his damage, but I know that he was escorted into the blocks, and I found out the guy's name. I found out who he was affiliated with and all this within minutes. And a lot of the guys that the individual was affiliated with, that particular gang, I was pretty close to. I knew these guys. I knew the shot callers. So the shot callers respected me. So I really wanted to find out what was up and why they, put a hit out on this particular individual who they knew was on my weight court. So they knew that he was cool with me. He was part of my brotherhood in that sense. As I stated earlier, I wasn't ever affiliated with the gang, but we did have a brotherhood of trust. And this reality, it really pissed me off. It really pissed me off. So, we tried to get this guy out of there. And I got him into the sitting courts, and we sat down for a minute. And he pulled the shirt somewhat up, just let me see his gut, and it was a lot of holes there. I mean, I remember that. I remember the how wide the skin was and the blood that was leaking out, and I had an extra shirt or two because I always carried extra clothing out to the yard in case because the weather, especially in Auburn in the winter, was brutal. So you had to layer up. I could only put so much on when you get out, but you could at that time you could take clothes with you out to the yard. Everything's searched or whatnot prior to going out, but clothing they really never beefed about back then. So you'd bring extra hoodies out or extra sweatpants or whatever, and you obviously have your state greens that you have to go out to the yard with. But so I started tearing up some of my shirts, making them so much like a tourniquet almost, trying to stop the bleeding. And we cleaned up his wound best we could. I had water. I mean, what else was there? We'd have soap and other. I had some water, and we all did this. And the guys that were on the court, the sitting court, I let them know what was up. So everybody was kind of on point and kind of putting up that sheer wall again so that I could do this and help this guy out. And you could see in his eyes. I mean, he was kind of he had that dim look on his eyes. There was like a hazy look on his eyes. He was almost in and out of consciousness at this point. So I was saying to him, "So we got to get you to medical, man. He's just this is bullshit." And obviously he knew if he went to medical, they would find out what was up, go to the box or whatever. Um, and obviously he wasn't going to rat the guy out. You're going to hold that down. You're not going to get the police or anybody else involved. There's that code. That's that code in there. You don't want to be a rat. And that's for sitting sure. I mean, that's the worst labels you could be next to a pedophile. So it's like, I understood that, but also didn't want this guy dying in front of me. He was a friend of mine, a personal friend of mine, and I I didn't want him dying, man. So lo and behold, started patching things up or whatever, and he basically him and I basically about 20 minutes later the yard closed, and we're slowly walking back, and he's just kind of laboriously moving around, and we're on point. I'm looking around, and I already sent word out that I wanted to speak to the shot callers of this particular uh, gang because I wanted to have a sit down. Want to figure out what the hell's going on here, and this could escalate. This could escalate to a race war because that's how fast it can escalate in prison. And so I already had word come out, and we were all on points. We didn't know if this was hit, a registered hit that they were going to start setting it off on the white guys, whatever the case may be. So we all had to be on point. Everybody who was associated with me and who was friends with me rallied around us because they heard that I was trying to help them out and trying to get him back to the blocks without being seen. And so we were going to get him back to his cell, and he locked in a different block than me. And I kept pressing him, trying to get him to medical because, as I said, it was pretty bad. I mean, he was leaking really bad. And I remember it. I mean, it was brutal. And I tried everything. I had blood on my hands. I couldn't wash my hands off because I just wanted this blood off, and I didn't want blood on me because if that stood out, then it put me involved with the incident and all this other stuff. And lo and behold, when the yards closed, we slowly made our way back to the blocks, and we had to we had to break out. I had to go one way, he had to go another way. So he gives me a big hug, and he said he felt a little better. He was drinking water and whatever, but he was still leaking. I mean, he was still leaking. But you need stitches, you need somebody to look inside it, make sure there's no internal damage because he got poked up with an ice pick, and sticking somebody in the stomach with an ice pick, the internal damage could be fatal. And I've seen that happen in prison. Men have been killed with ice picks, or, that is one of the various ways that you could take someone out inside the joint. So we finally got inside, and I went right, he went left, so to speak. And I was concerned. I mean, all night I was stressing out and trying to get word from passing kites on inside. Like when you're inside, you can pass through write piece of paper. It's called passing kites, and you hand it to the porter, who was the guy passing out the water, is the guy in the company. And I was good with the guy that was the porter for my particular company I was on. So I would pass kites out to various individuals to find out what's going on. And first and foremost, how was his condition? How was he? You pass out his cell. Did the bleeding stop? I mean, does he have medical? What's going on with him? And then I also wanted to know what was up with the shot callers. Did they reach out to, from what I reached out to them, did they reverberate back and send a message back? So this went on all night long until the porter locked in at around 10:30, almost 11 o'clock at that time. And I did hear back from the shot callers, and lo and behold, make a long story short, the guy who was put out for that hit, he wasn't meant to hit him. They were meant to hit this rapist, and the rapo wasn't there. And unfortunately, the rapo looked similar. Looked similar. It's a mistaken identity. I mean, that's what it really came down to. Is happened so many times in prison. Anybody who's been in the joint knows this. I mean, you can get hit up because you look similar to somebody else, or they mistake you for somebody else, and that's exactly what happened. And the guy that my brother hit up, he was in bad shape too. And make it make a really long story short, he eventually broke and told what happened. And the police ran up in my brother's cell. That's what I found out. Obviously, I wasn't there witness any of this. And they immediately grabbed him and brought him to medical. I mean, he did get some medical care that he desperately needed. Thankfully, he didn't have any internal damage. Internal organs weren't damaged or anything like that, but he bled profusely. And as far as I remember, he needed an infusion of blood. And but thank the gods, he persevered and pulled through it throughout the night. But he was put to the box like what he feared that would happen to him eventually. After he healed, and he was in medical for a while because the guy did rat on him, and the guy did good details of what happened, and so they both were reliable. I mean, in prison, I mean, they're not going to take sides in that sense. I mean, there's charges to be laid out, and there's legality and all this process. But back then, I mean, it wasn't like it is now. I mean, I don't even think either one of them were charged with anything. I mean, other than the stabbing inside the joint. I mean, they had it on the record, and so he had to carry that, and and that haunted him for many years. And he was hit many times at the board. He did not have a life sentence like I did, but he spent many years inside. He spent close to 20 years, and I'd say about 11 of those because of that incident. And the other guy too was shipped out. They were both boated out. And they go after something like that happens, they transfer you out of the prison pretty quick. So I never got a chance to speak to him really formally. I sent kites and this, that, and the third, but we never really had a chance to face talk again until just recently when he reached out to me through the phone. And we kicked it about a lot of things in life in general, and he kept thanking me profusely on the phone. And I ain't the type of person that seeks compliments or accolades in any form of fashion. I'm actually kind of uncomfortable in that fashion, but receiving the praise. But I appreciated it. I mean, hey, like I said, you did the same thing. You've done the same thing for me. I mean, hey, under the circumstances and the way we lived, it was live or die. it's really that simple. I mean, I know it sounds over dramatic, but it's the reality of life inside the prison system, especially back then. I mean, like I said, I imagine it's still as a prison is. Prison is prison. But yeah, I remember that. And what happened with the shot callers, I eventually had to sit down with two of the guys that were the shot callers in this particular gang. And as I said earlier, they were gentlemen. I knew these guys for many, many years. Um, and you know, we sat down, we talked it out, and thankfully nothing escalated from that. But it could have, and at many times things have escalated like that, and wars have taken place as a result of something like that. And it was a shitty situation about how you looked at it, and they were pissed off, and you know, they didn't sanction that, so to speak, and of course, they were concerned about us because we weren't a bunch of guys that we would easily be trifled with either. The guys that I was closest to, we weren't tough Tonys or anything like that. But we were men, man. We're gonna stand up for our honor in our life, and you're gonna hold down what you have in prison. You're gonna hold down the phone so you can make phone calls to your loved ones. You're gonna hold down the court so you have a place to stay and sit. Put your put your property down in your net bag and such. And also, the weight pits. Weight pits are sacred territory. I die for the weight pits. I would give my life in a fight to protect that and to hold that down. I mean, that was a sanctuary for all of us in so many ways. Anyone who's done any time understands this wholeheartedly. So, thankfully nothing escalated to that, and the guys actually apologized to the shot callers, and these dudes were stand up. I mean, they understood this was wrong. This wasn't something that was green lighted in any form of fashion. But I didn't see the guy for many years after that. As I stated previously, and it was just great to hear his voice, and I wanted to share that with all of you. I did actually find out a few months later that he was literally hit up 5 times. He had 5 puncture wounds in his abdomen, and after he recovered and he had to go through basically like a in-house trial. They give you a tier hearing, it's called, and they write the disciplinary infraction. And he went through that whole process, still healing from the knife fight. And he ended up being sentenced to 5 years in the box. And he did every day of that in the box. I come to find out, and we actually talked about that too, and during our conversation, and how he tried to keep his sanity in there. And he said he recalled a lot of things I talked about the value of reading, and he spent invaluable time reading a lot because you do have access to books, very limited, obviously, when you're in the box, but you do have access to that. So he said just he worked out a lot. He lost tons of weight. He lost close to 30 pounds, 35 pounds while I was in the box. You don't eat much, and stress will kill you and eat you alive. But he persevered. He's a strong-willed man, and I just wanted to give him a shout out on this video. And life tests us, man. Life tests us in so many ways, and we must face it head on, or be beaten by it. And you can get beaten down, you can get stomped out, and you could face the most horrific trials and tribulations. And through the fire, I mean, you sometimes forge a metal inside you that's unbreakable. And I gave props to him. We were talking about that fire inside, the fire you carry with you, and how important that is to get to where we are at this stage in our lives. And he's dealing with another battle, health issues now, that probably stem from years and years of being inside, eating that the carcinogenic food and the disgusting water, and just life in general, man. Breathing in the toxicity of the air and scents. I'm sure the walls with the asbestos and everything else, especially in Auburn, it's archaic and the structure is archaic. So he's dealing with what he's dealing with, and I send him my blessings and strength, and to persevere and deal with what he has to deal with. But that's life, man. Life is struggle. To go back to what we spoke about earlier, and in life, the things we face and the struggles we overcome, it reveals a man to himself. You see what you're about then, and what you're willing to do and not do to get to the other side of that struggle. And what awaits you there is something that is glorious in a sense, because then you can fall back and say, you can reflect, and the insight gained is invaluable, and the knowledge that you learn now through that struggle was something that will help you forge whatever it is you mean to create later in your life, moving forward on the pathway of opportunity laid out before you. That is life. But thank you all for your time and your energy that it takes to sit through these videos, and I truly appreciate it. Until next time, go with the gods. and persevere.